And what we were doing when we taught New York Theater Ballet all to read was we were using whole language. Whole language takes a word and you see the word, and rather than sound out the word the, for example, it isn't t, h, it's the. They go together, and you just memorize that that three-letter combination is the. When we taught New York Theater Ballet, we could say, see this combination of symbols, you were there teaching them, this is an arabesque, this is a padishah, this combination
No problem.
is a word.
I think we should move on.
Okay,
Sure.
how do people feel?
Yeah,
squeeze
I have-
this lemon dry? Go ahead.
I have last thought about that, but then with that kind of vocabulary only work for ballet. Modern
But
totally.
it also works for modern.
It works for
When
modern.
at Graham, they have certain
Oh yes.
symbol
Mhm.
groupings that are known to them as a movement that goes together, so it is a word.
Same with
Yeah,
the
but
ball.
then
And Lamone, they have certain groupings that are always used. It is part of their technique.
Okay.
So you can always point to the technique first, and then
But-
those become words.
but for postmodern, there's really not such thing as technique anymore. Yeah.
No, I mean, you have steps. You can look at steps and see that's walking, you know, running.
So, Sean, what shall we do next?
Yeah, no, are we squeeze that lemon dry? It's a great discussion. It gave me lots of new ideas about possible teaching. All right, so here are our next things. The inner focus, a symbol for swinging, derivation of relationships, this where a person is, the person is in the pin, and the timing of the initiation bow. So does anybody have a preference? Anne?
Well, the relationship bows
Wonderful.
came, the initial one, which was the straight line with the curve, came from Knust.
A straight line with a curve. Could you write what you
Address.
write it, and then we'll put it up.
Address them.
The touching bar?
Oh, that
Oh, the
came
addressing.
first. Oh,
The
that
addressing
came
bow.
first. Oh, that's fascinating.
The horizontal line with the bow. And it always came from the initiator, the person doing the movement, and inside was the person or object that was being addressed. So that was the original sign.
You know,
And it could be turned upside down.
For spatial reasons? Or was there another reason? For room on the staff, because that wasn't
Yes.
available.
And then the
let's hold this up. Oh, never mind. I'll do it from here. Go ahead.
yes, or
Right. Okay.
and then I and my colleagues started using the dotted bow to mean awareness. So you were not yet actively related, but there was a relating sense.
So this could just mean any kind of relating, or it really just did mean what we mean now, addressing?
He called it addressing because he usually had the object or person.
Do you know what I mean? So if somebody, like I was reading your wonderful, if anybody wants to read more about derivation of symbols, your wonderful series in the Lava Notator. Is everybody familiar with that? They're online. And it tells about Anne wrote all about the derivation of the whole system. But you did say something about in there that the very early on, even when I think I remember reading it, that when Laban was writing horizontally rather than vertically, I think that he
May I
started
stop
with
you
this.
there?
Yeah.
The books were published with the notation horizontally. At the time, they were using it vertically.
Oh.
But for layout on the page, as we know,
Oh.
it's much better for the notation to be horizontal.
Oh, interesting. Well, anyway, it was something that he started by saying, you correct me, that let's say my hand and my hand are touching, and what he simply did was to draw a straight line to make these connected.
Yes. Yes.
And then, and I was assuming, am I assuming that happened before this, Canoes?
Oh, yes.
And then he started, for whatever reason, making it curved. And I don't think you said why it was making it curved, but I'm assuming because then, for spatial reasons, you could arc it around other symbols or somehow, or what, so if we go way back to Laban,
Well,
that.
I don't remember if the curved bow was in his publications, his 1930 publications, but certainly Knust used it. And then the adding of the X, so you have contact, and then you have grasping, and then the support line when you're taking weight. I'm trying to remember how many of those came from Knust and how many we evolved and added a bit more. We'd have to go back and check that. But
What was the thinking, for example, about why touching would be a curve? And what was the thinking about why the support would, did they say, oh, let's make something that looks like supporting on a table, the way you teach little kids, or, and why an X, which has different meanings in the system, in the double X?
well, when
And
you're
all that.
grasping something, you are flexing.
Oh, you're flexing, and when you're going through something,
If I'm grasping her wrist,
and if you're gonna go through something, double X, you're gonna penetrate, that's what, that you're going closer in? Did they think in that way, or did it was just, oh, let's double X?
I think that the double X was just a convenience to express that
More
idea.
of. It didn't.
It had nothing to do with slight flexion and a lot of flexion.
It just happened.
It was a, what's the word I want to, when you assign a meaning to something, doesn't necessarily follow logic.
What about the support? Is that the same thing, that it was just, let's make this different from curved or
The curve, of course, can go down
Right.
as well as up, and the support bow also can go up or down.
But making an angular thing for support, was there any?
Yes, if it's angular, then it becomes a support.
But it was just,
And then you say, why? Well,
who knows?
Well, it would look
It's a
stronger than a
device.
curve. A curve
Oh.
doesn't seem to have as much ability to hold something up as something that's straight and.
so we could do a little bit of research, check that out.
Yeah.
Offhand, I don't remember.
And then the slide, like what I do with kids, but again, we're thinking a certain way, but that might be so different than what the, beginning people were doing. And also, they didn't have now the system's developed so much more, you know, I mean, as you said, how much Laban is in Laban notation. Did you read that ever? Her thing, go online, I mean, and
About the
read.
symbol,
And it's online and on the bulletin board. Do you know which one I'm talking about? It's a fascinating article. Do you remember writing that?
I do, because I can remember that it was Curtius that suggested that instead of having X's going across the page, where the X you had the upper body right and left, lower body right and left, and you have to jump from that to that. He suggested put them one on top of another and producing the staff, and you've got
Okay.
continuous moving until, of course, you get to the bottom of the page.
She just said,
You have to start again.
just write an example. So, well, I don't, yeah, could you just write an example, just for my minutes? So it'll make it.
That was a stroke of genius.
Also, the old way of using it, and then the current ones too. Yeah.
And then Anne talked also about, about in that article, and you can correct me, Anne, if I'm wrong. We just put up, we're beginning to put up the publications that started in 1943 called the Notation Record.
No.
DNB record. And in the very first thing is a thing about how, well, during the war we weren't allowed to, we couldn't tell you about Laban's thoughts because we weren't allowed to send symbols through. But now we're going to tell you Laban's latest thoughts. And one of his thoughts, or one of the things that he's emphasizing, is that they didn't say it this way, but this is that what we now call the system of reference, he didn't call it that, is stance. So when the system began, it was the stance was the default system of reference unless you said something different. And then, Anne, you also wrote about that in your articles about it.
But when you think about Laban space harmony, and you realize that you have forward and backward.
Right,
Backward, I mean, my arm is sideward in relation to
Exactly.
my body.
right. Forward.
All this, everything, this was set, and that was his initial analysis of movement. And so we inherited that plus the directional parts of the body. That it isn't an anatomical description, it's
Right.
spatial, whatever. And so that's where our system was lacking, in having the flexibility to write an anatomical description, to use another point of analysis. So, yes, a lot of development.
I also think that when you're teaching, like in that book that we did, that I helped with.
I'm writing a book about teaching.
No.
You haven't
Yeah,
taken
the
that
other
one?
one, first one.
Oh, the first one, the motif
Yeah.
note, right.
I think it's very helpful to students if you give them the where the symbol, what the pieces in the symbol mean. So it's like learning Latin roots.
Right,
You
the
know-
derivation.
You know the derivation of the Latin root. When you come across a new word,
Right.
you can know what it means, and that helps them to see what's in the movement. Because
Yes.
they have a visual image of the bits and pieces that are in the symbol
Right.
are what's built up to
Right.
make the movement.
The one thing
Should be taught.
that is of interest to me in that process, because I also feel, I personally love the idea of the building blocks and how that symbols evolved, and and Anne's genius about, you come up with a new idea. I'm thinking in particular about the altitude idea. I don't know if you remember that set of symbols, and then
That was Ray, the altitude.
No,
I mean,
it was mine. The altitude, like what if I'm low or middle or high. It was actually, I got the idea of it, couldn't come up with a symbol. Ray and I then played around, went on the bulletin board, playing. I love this story, I always tell it. Then you came to a theory meeting, Anne, and you're sitting next to me, and I said, gee, Anne, we've been struggling, and we went to, and what could be the symbol for this idea? Explain the idea. And you sat there, and you just went like this, and you could see the wheels. I could see the wheels working. And you said, oh, I know. And then you came up with the idea of the vertical dimension with space in it. That was, the symbol was your idea. And then we had other theory meetings, and we played with this and modified it and so forth. So, but it was made up of things that were in the system, whereas these relationship bows were kind of almost, not necessary. And what I really wanted to say on that point was, one of the issues that I find challenging when working with certain, not all but certain of the symbols that have evolved independently in the LMA community. Not that these symbols, now I wouldn't want to change them because they're now so embedded in the system, but they a lot of them are designed because they look like what they mean. So, for example, the symbol for,
They're ideographic.
is that the word? Oh, great. I'm for twisting. Well, that's not the good one. I don't know if that's a good one. Oh, or ball-like. Ball-like. A ball-like a shape form, right? It's because it looks like that, but it doesn't relate to other
rest of the
in the
system.
Labanate. I can't think of some other good examples, because unfortunately, when the people, I don't know if it's because of a lack of advanced understanding of the system as a whole, and so people don't know about the derivation of the symbols, or is it because that way of thinking, of seeing a picture, seeing something that's, it is so satisfying to the type of person who's drawn to the LMA work, we're just so laden or just imbued with the idea of imagery, for example. Imagery is a big part of the way people are trained. So, no, I just want to say one more thing. And when you do then teach, at least my experience, the students at LIMS, for example, the derivation of symbols and the logic of it, it really resonates. And then it makes them really appreciate, oh my goodness, it's a logical system.
Well, I can remember when we were coming up with symbols, I think we first tried to make the new symbol be built on symbols that we already had. And we found that as we started to do it, they got too complicated.
Are you talking about the particular, this one
No,
or
no,
other
just
one? In general?
The new symbols we came up with were
Okay.
too complicated, even though they might be logical. And especially if you were a writer, you could never get that down as you were writing.
Well, that I don't think should be a criteria.
No, well.
For developing
That's
systems.
another thing.
It's like saying, oh, we can't have that as a symbol because it's not easy to draw on Laban or children can't write that quickly. To me, that's not a criteria, but that's.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
But getting this is from what we were talking about before, what Anne was talking about before. But going back, so was there any logic to why the near symbol? Is it because the symbol for near? Was this?
Well, it's not quite touching.
So it is what we thought, you know. So here is an example of it's kind of the image of it is
Yes.
what?
Well, it would be like an incomplete touching
Right.
because it's broken.
Right.
Well, that goes along with your idea and your move of a sequence of going